What if the movies that changed your life almost never existed? What if the very studios that made them secretly worked to kill them before a single audience member could ever watch? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented Hollywood history. Executives buried masterpieces. They starved films of marketing. They locked prints in vaults. They mutilated director cuts. And in some cases, they literally paid millions to destroy finished movies. The system failed these films, and these films survived anyway. Number 15. The Thing, 1982. Picture 1982. Steven Spielberg's E.T. is dominating every theater in America. Children are crying happy tears over a friendly, glowing alien. And then, John Carpenter walks into Universal Studios with something completely different. Something cold, something paranoid. Something that shows aliens not as gentle visitors, but as shape-shifting biological nightmares hiding inside human flesh. The studio executives were not impressed. They were horrified, and not in a good way. Universal panicked. They demanded the marketing team bury the film's real tone and sell it as a cheap monster flick. Internal memos circulated calling the project too dark and too disturbing for mainstream audiences. The poster was deliberately misleading. No proper promotional campaign was launched. Critics savaged it upon release. One publication actually described it as a disgusting spectacle. Box office numbers collapsed. Carpenter was devastated publicly. Hollywood declared it a failure and moved on without looking back. But home video changed everything. Late-night television changed everything. Audiences slowly found the film on their own terms and realized what critics had missed. The suffocating paranoia, the groundbreaking practical effects that still hold up today, the genius of not knowing who to trust. The Thing transformed from a box office disaster into a studied masterpiece. Film schools now teach it. Directors cite it constantly. Hollywood tried to bury John Carpenter's greatest work. The audience simply refused to let it stay buried. Number 14. Heathers, 1988. Nobody in Hollywood knew what to do with a script about popular girls dying and a teenager treating murder like a social strategy. When Heathers landed on studio desks in the late 1980s, the reactions ranged from deeply uncomfortable to outright refusal. Executives who had built careers on safe teen comedies could not process a film that weaponized the genre against itself. Test screenings made marketing teams sweat through their suits. The result was a theatrical release so limited and so deliberately undersupported that it functionally did not exist for most of America. No wide rollout, no television advertising push, no studio faith of any kind. The film was essentially placed on a shelf and waited to be forgotten. Winona Ryder and Christian Slater gave performances that crackled with dangerous energy, and almost nobody got to see them in a theater. Then something happened that no executive predicted. People talked. The sharp dialogue spread person to person like a dark secret worth sharing. Viewers who discovered Heathers on VHS could not stop quoting it. Its savage wit and fearless dissection of high school social hierarchy hit differently from anything else in the genre. Lines entered pop culture without any studio help at all. Heathers grew into a generational touchstone entirely through audience passion. The film Hollywood feared would offend everyone instead became the film a generation claimed as their own. Number 13. Red Rock West, 1993. A drifter walks into a bar in rural Texas and gets mistaken for a hitman. Sounds like the setup for a great neo-noir thriller. And it is, but Gramercy Pictures did not see it that way. After test screenings went cold, the studio made a decision that seemed logical to them and baffling to everyone else. They dumped Red Rock West straight onto HBO before a single theater showed it. Nicolas Cage was not yet the cultural legend he would become. The studio had no faith in the material. What happened next is one of the genuinely rare stories in Hollywood history. A single passionate programmer at a San Francisco theater got hold of the film and convinced his venue to screen it. One theater. Word spread fast. That theater sold out repeatedly. Audiences who had already seen it on cable drove to watch it again on a proper screen. The theatrical run expanded organically from a single screen entirely through momentum the studio had nothing to do with creating. Red Rock West stands today as a masterclass in compact West Texas noir. Dennis Hopper delivers one of his most menacing performances. The tension never releases. Every scene earns its place. The studio gave this film every possible reason to disappear, and a community of passionate viewers refused to let that happen. Sometimes, the audience is simply smarter than the people running the business.
Number 12. The Fantastic Four, 1994. This one is not a story of a good film getting buried. This is the story of a film so catastrophically bad that a Marvel executive reportedly spent millions of dollars acquiring the final print, specifically to destroy it. Roger Corman produced this low-budget adaptation in a matter of weeks, purely to prevent Marvel from losing the character rights. The cast wore foam rubber suits. The special effects looked like a school project. Dr. Doom appeared to be wearing a metal Halloween costume from a discount store. The studio did everything to suggest this was a real movie. Trailers were cut. Posters were printed. Cast members were sent to conventions to promote it. Then someone with power and a checkbook decided the Marvel brand could not survive this thing existing in the world. The prints were acquired and destroyed. Or so the story goes. Because, in another twist worthy of the comics themselves, bootleg copies eventually surfaced anyway. The film refused to stay dead, even after someone literally paid to kill it. Fans finally watched it and discovered something beneath the technical disaster. A genuine earnestness. A scrappy love for the source material that the effects budget could not express, but the performances somehow conveyed. Today, the 1994 Fantastic Four is a cult artifact. Hollywood tried to erase it from existence. It became a legend instead. Number 11. Fanboys, 2009. Imagine the heartbeat of your movie being the exact thing the distributor wants surgically removed. That is what happened to Fanboys. Harvey Weinstein looked at a comedy about lifelong friends racing to see Star Wars Episode 1 before their terminally ill buddy ran out of time, and concluded the cancer storyline made the project unmarketable. He pushed hard for its removal. He argued that mixing mortality with comedy would confuse audiences and kill ticket sales. What he failed to understand was that the illness was not a liability. It was the reason any of it mattered. Fan communities exploded in outrage when word leaked that Weinstein wanted the emotional core of the film gutted. Petitions spread across early internet forums. Supporters organized campaigns. Entertainment press covered the battle between studio interference and creative integrity. The noise became too loud to ignore. The filmmakers fought back and managed to protect most of their original vision. When Fanboys finally reached theaters, it was not a blockbuster. But it was exactly what its creators intended it to be. A love letter to fandom. A genuine story about friendship and the things we do for people we are losing. The audience that found it claimed it permanently. Weinstein tried to make it safer. The fans made sure it stayed true. Number 10. Underwater, 2020. 7 miles beneath the ocean surface, something ancient and enormous is waiting. Underwater arrived in January 2020, with Kristen Stewart leading a survival horror cast through one of the most claustrophobic settings in recent genre cinema. The film was actually completed in 2017. 3 years passed between completion and release, and every one of those years tells you everything about how Disney valued this project after acquiring Fox. January is where studios send movies they have given up on. The minimal advertising campaign confirmed what insiders already suspected. Disney had inherited a film they had no emotional investment in and no commercial strategy for. Critics compared it unfavorably to Alien. The comparison was reductive and unfair. Underwater is not trying to be Alien. It is a lean, relentless creature feature that operates on pure momentum and practical dread. The creature reveals in the final act are genuinely shocking. Streaming eventually gave the film what theatrical release denied it. Audiences discovered it at home and recognized what critics buried under lazy comparisons. Today, Underwater has a growing, passionate following that insists it deserved the January it never got. Not a dump month, a proper release with proper respect. Number 9. The Empty Man, 2020. Forget everything you think you know about studio horror. The Empty Man is not a jump scare machine. It is not a franchise setup. It opens with a 20-minute prologue set in the mountains of Bhutan that has almost nothing to do with what follows and is somehow one of the most unsettling sequences in 21st century horror. Director David Pryor spent years crafting a dark, cosmic mystery about urban legends and cults and the terrifying mechanics of belief itself. Then Disney acquired Fox, and the film became an orphan. Marketing materials presented The Empty Man as a generic teen horror title. The actual film bears no resemblance to that framing whatsoever. Audiences expecting cheap scares found themselves inside a dense, philosophical nightmare that demanded active attention. Many walked out confused. Many others realized they had just watched something genuinely rare and could not stop thinking about it for days afterward. Horror communities online began unpacking the film's layered mythology. Critics who revisited it wrote lengthy reconsiderations. The movie that Hollywood quietly threw into October with no support has steadily built one of the most devoted cult audiences in recent horror history. Pryor's debut deserved a director's career. The film deserved the audience it has slowly earned.
Number 8. Idiocracy, 2006. Here is the thing about Idiocracy that makes the studio's behavior almost poetic. A movie about society becoming too stupid to function was considered too smart for mainstream audiences. Fox fulfilled their contractual obligation and released it in 6 cities with 0 press packets. No advertising, no press screenings, no promotional materials of any kind. The film opened in the dark, and the studios seemed to be hoping it would quietly die before anyone noticed. Mike Judge had already been through this once with Office Space. He knew the pattern. Major corporations featured in the film were reportedly not enthusiastic about their satirical portrayal. That discomfort likely factored into how aggressively the studio suppressed its own product. What Fox could not suppress was the internet. DVD copies moved through online communities with the velocity of contraband. People watched it and immediately recognized the landscape they were living in. The absurdist future of Idiocracy kept making contact with present reality in ways that felt less like comedy and more like documentary. Quotes from the film became political shorthand. The movie that was never advertised became one of the most referenced comedies of its generation. Hollywood tried to release it quietly enough that nobody would find it. Everybody found it. Number 7. Equilibrium, 2002. The Matrix had just rewired what audiences expected from science fiction action cinema. When Equilibrium arrived in 2002, with its own vision of a totalitarian future where emotion itself is outlawed and a government enforcer begins to feel things he was trained to suppress, the studio saw a liability, not an opportunity. The comparison to the Wachowskis' film would be too close. The marketing would be impossible. The international money was already secured, so the American theatrical release became an afterthought. Christian Bale was not yet Batman. The studio did not believe in him or the material enough to find out. The film opened in a handful of American theaters with almost no promotional support and disappeared within weeks. Action fans who stumbled onto it through video rental discovered something that went far beyond Matrix comparisons. The gun kata sequences are genuinely innovative. The emotional arc of a man rediscovering his humanity inside a system designed to eliminate it lands with real weight. The dystopian world building is rigorous and disciplined. Equilibrium found its audience through word of mouth across DVD culture and early internet forums. Today, it is cited as a direct influence on modern action filmmaking. The studio that ignored it watched it become exactly the cult classic they were too impatient to allow it to be. Number 6. Snowpiercer, 2013. Bong Joon-ho had already made The Host. He had proven he could work. He came to Harvey Weinstein with a completed film that critics in multiple countries were calling a masterpiece. A post-apocalyptic class warfare thriller set entirely on a train circling a frozen Earth. Weinstein's response was to demand 25 minutes be cut for American audiences. His reasoning was that Americans needed a simpler, faster version of the story. Bong refused. What followed was one of the most documented standoffs between a director and a distributor in recent film history. Weinstein effectively blocked a wide American theatrical release as punishment for the director's refusal to compromise. A film that opened to massive acclaim internationally received a token U.S. release in a fraction of the theaters it deserved. Bong Joon-ho was willing to lose American box office to protect his film. History vindicated that decision completely. Snowpiercer became a streaming phenomenon. It earned a television adaptation that ran for multiple seasons. And 6 years later, the same director returned to Harvey Weinstein's backyard and won 4 Academy Awards for Parasite. The man Weinstein thought needed to be simplified was teaching Hollywood what cinema could be. Number 5. Brazil, 1985. Some movies are buried because studios think they are bad. Brazil was nearly buried because it was too strange, too bleak, and too unwilling to smile on command. Terry Gilliam had created a dystopian nightmare wrapped in absurd comedy, where paperwork feels like a weapon, dreams are the only escape, and the future looks less like tomorrow than a corrupted version of today. Universal did not see a masterpiece. They saw a problem. Studio boss Sid Sheinberg wanted the film reshaped into a shorter, happier version, later nicknamed the Love Conquers All cut. Gilliam refused to let his dark ending be softened into something easier, safer, and less honest. The fight became legendary. Gilliam screened the film privately, challenged the studio publicly, and even took out an advertisement asking when Universal would release his movie. Then critics stepped in. The Los Angeles Film Critics Association honored Brazil with major awards, forcing Universal's hand and pushing the film toward release. What followed was not a mainstream hit. It was something more dangerous. A film that survived studio control and became a cult monument to artistic resistance. Brazil proved that sometimes Hollywood does not bury a movie because it lacks vision. Sometimes it buries one because the vision is too powerful to control.
Number 4. Dredd, 2012. Karl Urban kept the helmet on the entire film. That single creative decision tells you everything about the respect this production had for its source material. Judge Dredd in the comics never removes his helmet. It is not a character quirk. It is a statement about identity and law becoming indistinguishable. The 1995 Sylvester Stallone version had Dredd remove his helmet in the first act. Fans never forgot it. This 2012 adaptation corrected every mistake and earned almost nothing for the effort. The studio released a brutal R-rated action film and then apparently forgot to tell anyone it existed. Marketing was sparse. The theatrical run was brief. $41 million worldwide against a significantly larger production budget meant Hollywood immediately filed it as a failure and moved on. What came next was one of the most dramatic home video reversals in action cinema history. Audiences discovered Dredd on streaming and on disc and erupted. The intensity of the fan response was disproportionate to anything the box office suggested. Online petitions for a sequel gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Urban himself publicly campaigned for a continuation for years. Dredd did not fail because it was bad. It failed because nobody told the people who would have loved it that it existed. Number 3. Office Space, 1999. Mike Judge finished a comedy about the soul-destroying reality of corporate cubicle life and delivered it to a studio that did not laugh enough during test screenings. One executive reportedly described it as too weird and too deadpan to work. The marketing campaign was scrapped. The release was deliberately low profile. Discussions about shelving the film entirely were reportedly serious. 20th Century Fox released Office Space into theaters with the energy of someone leaving a bag of trash on a curb at midnight. The film made almost no money. Critics were lukewarm. Hollywood declared it a failure before the opening weekend ended. Then, something slow and unstoppable began on DVD. Office Space did not go viral in the internet sense, because the internet did not yet work that way. It spread the old way, person to person, coworker to coworker. The film's specific details about corporate misery were so accurate that viewers felt personally targeted. The broken printer, the TPS reports, the passive-aggressive management speak, Milton's red stapler. These became cultural artifacts. Quotes from a movie that nobody saw in theaters became standard vocabulary in offices across America. The film about corporate failure became a cult phenomenon, while the executives who called it too weird attended their TPS report meetings.
Number 2. Donnie Darko, 2001. Richard Kelly finished a film about a disturbed teenager receiving apocalyptic visions from a man in a rabbit suit and the fabric of time itself potentially unraveling around a single suburban household. The studio looked at it and genuinely did not know what shelf to put it on. Science fiction? Teen drama? Psychological horror? The categories collapsed into each other, and marketing teams paralyzed themselves trying to find an angle. Then September 11th happened. The film contains imagery of an airplane engine crashing into a house. Promoting any film involving aviation destruction in late 2001 was functionally impossible. The release was buried quietly. Critics were divided. Audiences left theaters confused and unsettled. Box office returns were negligible. By any conventional measure, Donnie Darko died in theatrical release without leaving a mark. Then, the internet did something extraordinary. Early online forums filled with people who could not stop thinking about the film. They started drawing the timeline. They debated Frank. They built theories about tangent universes and self-sacrifice and what the ending actually meant. The confusion that killed the theatrical run became the obsession that built the cult. The director's cut, released years later, deepened the mythology further. Donnie Darko is now studied like a text. Number 1. Midnight Meat Train, 2008. Lionsgate completed a Clive Barker adaptation starring Bradley 2000D Cooper as a New York photographer who discovers that something deeply wrong is happening on the late-night subway. Something ritualistic, something ancient, something with Vinnie Jones swinging a meat hammer in a darkened train car in ways that should not be described in polite terms. The film was scheduled for a proper, wide theatrical release. Clive Barker publicly announced it. Fans of his work prepared for it. Then, studio politics intervened, and the release was quietly catastrophized from within. Lionsgate was undergoing internal changes that shifted priorities away from completed projects that powerful people had suddenly lost interest in protecting. Midnight Meat Train was pulled from its wide release and placed into a token, limited run that functionally made it a direct-to-video product with better cinematography than it deserved to be carrying. Barker spoke about the situation with visible frustration in multiple interviews. The film's director and cast watched their theatrical release evaporate for reasons unrelated to the quality of the work. But Barker's name carries weight in horror communities that run deep and run loyal. The film found its audience through disc and digital release and built the cult following it would have built in theaters had anyone been allowed to see it there. Hollywood ended the theatrical run. Nobody could end the film.